Every dawn at the gate of the Serengeti Wildlife Reserve began not only with golden sunlight staining the morning mist, but also with a long, deep, and heart-wrenching roar echoing from a solitary old male lion. He did not enter, did not charge, showed no aggression of a hungry predator. He simply stood there, right in the open field before the gate, his eyes glinting with a sorrow that words could not express. Every morning he came, let out a mournful and desperate roar, then silently turned away, trudging into the fading mist like a ghost among the vast wilderness. At first, his appearance caused panic throughout the camp. Tranquilizer rifles were placed on high alert. Night shift guards doubled their vigilance. Emergency alerts echoed through the loudspeakers. But then came the second day, the third, and by the 10th day, he still came at the exact hour, to the exact spot, with the exact same roar unchanged. There were no corpses, no attacks, no signs of hunger, only a sorrowful persistence and a gaze fixated painfully at the iron gate. Gradually, fear turned into suspicion, and then transformed into something indescribable sympathy. Staff at the reserve began calling him by affectionate names: the Old Man of Serengeti, the Early Guest, or simply the Silent Father. A young staff member named Amina often stood hidden behind the glass window each morning, quietly observing. There was something in the old lion's roar that choked her up like a plea ignored by the world, like the cry of a soul unable to form words. And no one knew that behind those eyes was a cry for help, not for himself, but for something more important than his own life. In the early weeks, anxiety crept into every night shift at the Serengeti Reserve. Although the old male lion showed no sign of aggression or stalking humans, his unusual presence and the mournful roar he let out each morning unsettled everyone, as though a disaster were looming nearby. "Maybe it's lost its mind." A seasoned staff member shook his head during the internal meeting, his voice weary. "It must be at least 14 in age when lions start to go mad from loneliness or the hunger they can no longer satisfy." Another person added, "It might have picked up the scent of meat from the camp. If we wait too long, it might try to breach the gate." The discussion stirred up 3 proposed solutions: tranquilize and move it into isolation, use horns and vehicles to scare it off, or call in a specialist rescue team to intervene more forcefully. Yet no one dared make the final decision, because the lion wasn't truly causing harm. It just appeared, then disappeared like a sorrowful shadow. Amid this tense atmosphere, Amina, the new staff member who had only been at the camp for less than 3 months, held a very different impression. Each morning, she quietly stood by the window near the gate, observing the old lion through the blurred glass. She saw clearly it showed no signs of madness or threat. On the contrary, in its eyes was a sorrow like that of someone who had lost everything. It was something almost human, a silent plea. "I think it's crying for help," Amina whispered during the meeting, her eyes shining with something even she couldn't name. "We always assume wild animals only react by instinct. But what if this time is different?" Her words caused the entire meeting room to fall silent for a moment. A manager questioned her, half skeptical. "Crying for help? Why do you think that?" "Because every morning before it leaves, it turns its head to look at the gate. There's no hatred or frenzy in its eyes, only a suffocating kind of despair." Amina asked for permission to observe it more closely, proposing the formation of a small team to follow the lion in the morning and see where it went after leaving the gate. While many were doubtful, a few of the younger staff members expressed their support. Eventually, a discreet tracking mission was approved in the condition that it wouldn't interfere with general operations. Inside Amina, a quiet certainty was growing. This lion was not Medit, was leading them to something humanity had long overlooked. For an entire week, Amina recorded every detail without missing a single morning. She woke up before dawn, hiding behind the wall near the reserve's gate, her eyes fixed on the silhouette of the old lion. Every time it arrived, it roared a few mournful cries, then turned toward the southwest, where tall, tangled grasses led into a desolate land few dared to visit. She noted everything: the time, the direction it walked, the intensity of its roar, its limping gait, even the moments it glanced back at the camp, as if waiting for someone to finally listen. And then, one evening, as the sunlight faded and clouds began to veil the sky, Amina made her decision. She would no longer just watch. Despite her superior's warning, "Don't be foolish and follow it. You'll be suspended if you act on your own." Amina quietly left the camp, bringing only a pair of binoculars, a notebook, a small bottle of water, and a fierce belief that the lion wasn't seeking help for himself, but for something much greater. She followed the tracks embedded deep in the soil-large, sunken, uneven prints, as if the lion had been walking with a heavy burden on his back. Wild grass slapped her face, thorny bushes tore at her trousers, but Amina pressed on, her heart pounding from suspense and emotion. She crossed a plain scattered with boulders, a place where antelope herds had once passed. The deeper she went, the sparser the trees became, only thorny shrubs remained, and the wind howled through the openness, carrying the dry scent of earth and the solitude of the wild. The sun tilted behind the hillside, and finally, after nearly 2 hours of silent pursuit, Amina found herself standing before a canyon carved deep into the land barren, jagged and hauntingly desolate. The old lion stopped at the ridge and let out a long roar, no longer ferocious, but like a cry of anguish. Then he stepped forward a few paces, slowly, and sat at the canyon's edge, eyes fixed downward as if waiting for something or someone. Amina approached cautiously, frozen in place when she heard a faint whimper echoing from the depths of the ravine. It was a tiny sound, like a young creature, fading. She held her breath. Her chest ached. "No, it can't be. Something's down there. A cub?" Amina whispered to herself, her hand trembling as she raised her binoculars. And there it was at the bottom of the gorge, a lion cub curled up, its back caked in mud, its body scratched and streaked with blood. Amina collapsed to her knees at the canyon's edge, her vision blurring from the shock and heartbreak. The old lion hadn't come to threaten the camp, had come to plead with the humans to save his little cub, who had been trapped down there for days. A single tear slipped down Amina's cheek. She knew the truth was clear, no, and it was time to act. Beneath the fiery twilight, as the sun began to fade, the weak roar echoing from the rocky cliffs left Amina breathless. It wasn't an illusion, nor the whistle of wind through the gorgite, was a real, broken, desperate cry from a small soul waiting to be found. Amina immediately crept along the canyon's edge, her heart pounding wildly inside her chest. She turned over bushes, shifted loose rocks, her hands trembling from anticipation and fear. And then, amid the collapsed crevices beneath a large boulder, she saw Ita lion Kuptani, shivering, curled into a tight ball inside a narrow crevice. The once golden fur was now matted with mud, and dried blood clung in blotches around its hind legs. Its eyes were barely open, exhausted, terrified, but when they met Amina's gaze, it let out a faint whimper, as if clinging to the last fragile thread of hope. Above on the cliff, the old male lion roared again. This time, the sound wasn't fierce. It was choked, aching, as if calling out to his cub in desperation. It was the call of a father drained of strength, but who had never given up searching for his lost child. Amina froze. Every doubt, every fear she'd felt in the mornings when the lion appeared at the camp gate now, all of it melted away. He had never intended to attack. He had only come to ask for help, to plead silently, in a world of humans those he once may have seen as enemies. But now, the ones he had risked everything for, hoping someone might finally understand. Amina broke down in tears. The wind and dust carried them down into the cold crevice. She reached for her radio, her hands trembling as she pressed the button. "Headquarters, this is Amina. I've found a lion cub trapped in the Western Canyon. It's in very weak condition. Requesting an emergency rescue team immediately. I repeat, this is urgent." Her voice cracked, but her eyes had never looked more determined. She turned to look at the old lion. He was still the emotionless, eyes fixed on the canyon. Eyes clouded by age, but glowing with renewed light, when Amina gave a soft, affirming nod. "I'll save your child," she whispered. And just then, the wind shifted. Another roar rose from the cliff above, this one stronger, as if it carried a thank you, a final act of trust passed into the hands of a human. A human who wasn't afraid and who had chosen to listen. Amina knew. She had just stepped into a rescue mission, not just for a cubit, to save something much greater, the fragile bond of trust between humanity and the wild. She remained kneeling by the cliff's edge when the rescue team from the sanctuary arrived. The wind whipped through her hair, but her eyes never left the canyon below, where the lion cub continued to let out soft, fading cries. At the top of the ridge, the old male lion still stood like a statue, his cloudy eyes full of life, following every move of the humans below. "We have to hurry," Amina said, her voice shaking but firm. The rescue team began their work unrolling ropes, setting up pulleys, and illuminating the fissure with powerful floodlights. The golden fur, once vibrant, was now matted with mud and streaked with dried blood around its hind legs. Its eyes, half open and glazed with exhaustion and fear, met Amina's gaze, letting out a faint whimper, a fragile thread of hope reaching out. Above, the old lion roared not with ferocity, but with a choked, anguished call, as if summoning his cub from the depths of despair. It was the cry of a father, worn and weary, yet unwavering in his search for his lost offspring. Amina stood frozen, the morning encounters at the camp gate flashing through her mind. The lion's presence hadn't been a threat. It had been a silent plea for help, a plea that had gone unheard until now. Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached for her radio, her voice trembling. "Base camp, this is Amina. I've located a lion cub trapped in a crevice to the west. It's in critical condition. Immediate rescue assistance required. Repeat, urgent situation. Reddit." She turned to the old lion, still perched at the edge, his eyes locked onto hers. With a resolute nod, she whispered, "I'll save your child." A sudden gust carried the lion's roar once more, this time, stronger, filled with gratitude and trust. It was as if he was entrusting his cub's life to her hands. Amina understood. This mission was more than a rescue. It was a bridge of trust between humans and the wild. As she knelt by the crevice, the rescue team arrived, setting up ropes and pulleys. The lion remained still, watching intently. "We must act swiftly," Amina urged, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her. Juma, the team's climbing expert, secured his harness and began his descent. Each movement sent small rocks cascading down, narrowly missing the cub. "Careful!" Amina called out, her heart pounding. The lion above let out a low growl, not of menace, but of encouragement, as if urging his cub to hold on. The team was struck by the lion's unwavering vigil. Reaching the cub, Juma assessed its condition. "It's alive, weak, but hanging on," he reported. Relief washed over the team. Amina's tears flowed freely. Gently, Juma placed the cub into a padded rescue bag. The ascent was slow, every eye fixed on the swaying bundle. The ground trembled subtly, not from machinery, but from the lion's approach. He stepped closer to the edge, peering down as his cub was lifted. When the bag reached the top, silence enveloped the scene. Juma opened it, and the cub let out a faint cry. Joy erupted among the team. Amina rushed forward, kneeling beside the cub, whispering, "You're safe now. Your father never gave up on you." From above, the lion's roar echoed not of sorrow, but of reunion. It was a sound of life restored, a testament to paternal love and human compassion. Amina looked up, tears streaming, witnessing a true miracle of the wild. The sun climbed higher, casting warm light over the gorge that had just witnessed a profound act of love. The old lion, his frame lean and mane grizzled, approached his rescued cub. The rescue team stood back, holding their breath, not wanting to disturb the sacred moment. The lion lowered his head, gently nuzzling his cub's forehead. No roar, no display of dominance, just a silent exchange of relief and affection. In that tender gesture, a world of emotion was conveyed. The cub still lay motionless, but its eyes slowly opened, meeting its father's gaze. They looked at each other, no growls, no gestures, just that look was enough to say, "I'm alive, and you are still here." Then, gently, the lion father lay down beside his cub. His muzzle trembled as it touched the dust-streaked, blood-dried fur of his child. The first lick slow, like a tender reassurance. Then a second, and a third, each one, carrying a joy too deep for words. Soft, low growls began to rise, not loud but resonant, like a lullaby from a father to the child who had just stepped back from the edge of death. Those sounds, though faint, reached deep into the hearts of everyone standing around them. Amina covered her mouth, tears streaming uncontrollably. No one said a word, but every member of the team stood in silent awe, tears quietly rolling down sunburned cheeks. Even Sympathy Man, usually known as the strongest, had reddened eyes, his hand clenched around the medicine bag as if seeking something solid to hold on to. No one moved. They simply stood, watching father and son lying together, bathed in dappled sunlight on the dusty earth. Every gesture, every shiver, every quiet rumble spoke of a bond that transcended species, the love of a father. A young team member whispered, as if speaking only to himself, "I never thought I could cry over a lion." Amina only nodded, her eyes never leaving the two figures, father and son, a lifetime and a new beginning. In the gorge that had once echoed only silence, now there was the soft wind, the heartbeat of humans, and the faint breaths of a lion cue ball weaving into a gentle hymn of nature, a song of unspoken, yet boundless, love. After the tearful reunion between the lion father and son, something changed forever in the hearts of those who witnessed it. Back at Serengeti Wildlife Reserve, Amina was no longer just the shy new staff member. She had become a symbol of a new way of thinking, one rooted in reverence and deep listening between humankind and the wild. The story of the old lion who roared every morning at the camp gate, once seen as dangerous, deranged, had now become a profound lesson in patience and empathy. Right after the rescue operation, the park management held a special meeting. The atmosphere was no longer tense like the earlier discussions, where arguments had echoed over whether to sedate or chase away. Now, all eyes turned toward Aminathe, one who had dared to believe, dared to step forward, and because of that, a life had been saved. A new protocol was established. They called it the 3-step protocol: observe, feel, empathize. Before rushing to intervene, staff members were encouraged to observe carefully, not just with their eyes, but with their hearts. The sign in front of the reserve gate was also replaced. Next to the usual warning about wild animals, a new, touching line had been added. "Every roar tells a story. Please listen." It wasn't long before the media caught wind of this extraordinary tale. The photo of the lion father standing beside his frail cub, sunlight shining upon his dust-covered coat, spread like wildfire. Major newspapers in South Africa and around the world published the story with headlines like, "The Father Who Roared at the Camp Gate and the rescue that silenced humanity. Thousands of comments poured in from conservation researchers to elementary school students in faraway cities. A teacher from Brazil shared that she had used the story to teach her students about compassion. A photographer from Norway flew to Serengeti, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary lion father with his own eyes. And at that very land, every day, visitors would stop their cars at the reserve gate, gazing at the patch of ground where the lion had once roared for days on honoring not just a rescue, but the belief that nature has never been indifferent. It's just that we humans have too often been unfeeling. Amina stood beneath the sweeping sky, her hand resting gently on her chest, the place where her heart stirred every time she remembered that pleading gaze. She knew that from that day on, Serengeti was no longer just a wildlife reserve. It had become a place where nature and human hearts found a common language again. The sun had just begun to rise, and a thin mist still lingered over the golden fields. Amina sat alone on the Serengeti plain, right at the edge of the gorge where the emotional rescue had once taken place. Weeks had passed since that day, but her heart still trembled whenever she thought of the lion father's desperate eyes, and the faint cries echoing from the rocks, the call of a cub clinging to life amid the remnants of the wild. Now, all that remained were the scratches left by the pulley ropes, a strip of gauze fluttering in the wind, and a newfound peace. Amina often returned to this placenot for duty, but simply to quietly feel the presence of life that had once been threatened, misunderstood, and then saved by faith. She closed her eyes, letting the wind tangle her hair as the memories returned, like a gentle breeze cooling the wild heat of the savannah. And just then, a deep roar rose from the distance. Amina opened her eyes. On the hilltop opposite, in the soft morning light, two lion figures appeared large, one small. They stood there in silence, but the gaze of the lion father was unmistakable. A slow nod, one step forward, then he turned back to look at her own final time. The young cub also paused, its bright eyes glistening, quietly watching the person who had once saved it. And then the two turned away, slowly walking into the sunlit savanna forestas, if offering an eternal thank you, wordless but profound. Amina choked up. A gentle smile slowly appeared beneath her tear-filled eyes. She knew life was moving forward, with hope and gratitude. A chapter had closed, but the journey of connection between humans and nature had never truly ended. If you felt something stir within you from the lion's eyes, from Amina's story, from the silent power of nature, click like and subscribe to help spread these messages of kindness to even more people. Have you ever witnessed a magical moment between humans and animals? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because every story is a reminder that a heart that listens can create miracles. Thank you for following this story. See you on the next journey where life, love, and hope continue to quietly take root.